Good morning and good evening, everybody, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. My name is Khawaja Shams. I'm one of the community champions at Believe in Serverless, and really excited to be here alongside one of my favorite people, Sheen. Sheen has been an incredible member of the community, and I'll tell you all about his professional career, but something really important about Sheen that you should know is that he is a great mentor. After becoming, an incredible influencer himself, I've just seen Sheen promote other people into leaders and share their bright ideas, and it's always been an inspiration the way he carries himself. Sheen was an engineering leader at Lego, and he led a lot of their journey into the serverless world in a production environment. And alongside that, Sheen has been an incredible speaker. He is a great member of the community. He goes around and promotes events and just makes all these events better by sharing his deep practical insights. He's also the author of a great book that I highly recommend you pick up if you're considering, enterprise development in general, and you really want a framework on how to evaluate the various technology choices, including serverless. So that book, I just put it in the comments. You can purchase it on Amazon. I bought a Kindle version, which means I can't get Sheen to sign it. But I really enjoyed reading it. It had great, practical examples from other companies like Taco Bell from Robbie Kohler, and I believe Luke from PostNL as well, that you can download as part of the book. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sheen, and thank you so much for being here, Sheen.
Thanks a lot, Khawaja. Amazing to hear all the nice words. I wish I could hear all day. So yeah, great to be here. It's been a while. Me and Alan's been planning this day, and I'm so happy that it just happened today, or happening today. Let me share my screen, and then we can get going. Right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, it's all clear. We can see you and the screen.
Okay. Just 1 second. My clicker, for some reason, is not responding, but I have my laptop, so it's not a big deal. While I try something. Okay, 1 second. Okay, here we go again.
If you are just joining, we have Sheen here, and while we prepare for him to share his screen, I just want to put a plug in for his book. You can there's a link that's posted, and you can come check it out. And if you have questions along the way, just feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll get Sheen to answer them as they come up.
All right, it's good, right, Khawaja?
Yep, we can see it perfectly now.
Okay, excellent. Hey, everyone. Thank you all so much. Joining me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I'm so glad to be here. You may be thinking, Sheen, this title is probably a bit, too much given the climate and the noise about serverless these days. But let's see how we get to. My name is Sheen Brisals, and thanks, Khawaja, for the nice introduction. I'm a technologist engineering leader, co-author of a book titled Serverless Developer on AWS with my colleague, our ex-colleague, Luke Hedger. And this has been kind of, it came out earlier this year. And we've been kind of, gathering all the ideas and thoughts for a few years before it came together. Now, this is probably one of the least technical or non-technical talks you might have heard in this forum here. But hopefully, as I go through certain things in this talk, you will kind of get some clarity on some of the concerns or debates and noise around serverless recently in the industry. Right. Okay. So let me make a start. So this is like a glimpse of the universe. We all know. But according to astronomers, scientists, what they're saying is the universe is expanding. Thank goodness it's expanding, because if it's the other way around, we would be in trouble, right? Now, as part of the universe, we have our own Earth. And with all the things that are going around, its climate is changing. So we hear all the time about the, green energy and all sorts of things. And inside the earth, the technology has been changing for decades or for many years. And it's evolving ever. It's evolving fast. It's evolving every day, every second. So that's kind of the pace things are moving. Now, if we look at our lifestyle, we are also changing. We now need everything here, fingertips, all sorts of things, because our demands are growing. We demand many things. So technology meets our demand, and then we change our goalposts. We demand something more, and then technology is in a race to satisfy us with all the new things. And the enterprises or the businesses are continuously in this cycle. That's exactly Dave Anderson and Mark and Mike wrote in the book Flywheel Effect, that the organizations, the modern enterprises needs to constantly harness the technology to innovate and power the change. That's the only way that we can kind of survive in this modern, fast-paced world. So that means if serverless is for you, then you must acknowledge and accept that change happens all the time. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So if we go back, back in 1950s, I don't know how many of you are familiar with or worked with mainframes, but few of my friends back in the 90s, they they preferred to work on mainframes. And the story is like they all became millionaires because of Y2K. If you know Y2K, the year 2000 syndrome. All they had to do was change the 2-digit format to 4 digits. Bingo. They're all, rich and famous. And then moving on, and, few years from on, the virtual machines came along. Now, virtual machines, along with the power of networking, kind of, brought way for the cloud services that we consume, today. This is like in a nutshell in a single page. If we now look at a bit more in depth, the evolution of serverless, for example. So we had mainframes. Then the research around the networking began back in the 60s. So along with those experiments or the research and development, combining with the virtualization technology, and the cloud computing term actually appeared in 1996. There is a debate between two parties who came up with the term, but that doesn't matter. So that's when, the early days, we realized that, okay, there is a way we can kind of connect computers, remote computers all around the world to form a web or the cloud, the way of working together. And then soon after, Amazon and other companies started to work on several experiments and also ideas like infrastructure as service and platforms and things came along. Now it's interesting to note that I don't know how many of you know 20 years ago, SQS, the simple queue service beta was announced. So if you know SQS, it's a managed serverless service. 20 years later, we're still arguing, debating, trying to define serverless and all sorts of things. Right. So it's important to recognize this because it is, it happened way, way before the serverless term even, became a thing. It only started to appear in, 2012. But we had services like SQS, S3, etc., existed way before the serverless term came to being. And then from there on, AWS Lambda came that basically, took the serverless term or the whole the technology to a different level. And from there, so many services. I'm not going to go through all those things because I mentioned EventBridge is one of the key services, one of my favorite services that came along in 2019. Now, I was at Serverless Days London when this was announced. I had no idea of this service. So sitting next to me was Danilo Puksha from AWS. And I was curiously asking Danilo, what is this? So Danilo's definition of event project that day was like, Shane, this is like CloudWatch events on steroid. Wow. I was like, wow. When did AWS start to inject steroids and drugs onto their services? Now, jokes aside, the way these services evolved and still evolving, we can see that kind of the pattern and the power behind all the cloud services. So that's how the whole innovation happens. A few years ago, I think soon after the lockdown, Jeff Barr, the chief evangelist at AWS, he was at my previous workplace. He was conducting a virtual conference. So I was chatting with him online because I was in a different location, and I was curious to know from Jeff or from AWS, what is coming next for serverless? I thought, a few years that by the time I was into serverless, I thought, okay, serverless is all done and dusted. Now, he said to me, Sheen, we are just starting with serverless. It has years and years of service to offer, So that's how things are kind of slowly evolving. We are still kind of trying to figure out, where can we fit serverless better? How can we do, application development with serverless better? How can we bring serverless into an enterprise to access with all the other things? So this is exactly what I was saying. So if we need to be with serverless, if serverless is is for you, for your organization, they have to have this sort of mindset. The next thing is serverless is for you if you understand its capabilities. Actually, there are three things: characteristics and benefits and limitations. And so many people who are new to serverless, they trip over here. So let's start with the characteristics. I think if you've been working with serverless, most of you should be familiar with all these characteristics. Wonderful, low cost, scale zero, or is a cloud computing model, pay per use, etc., 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 etc. Now, the benefits of serverless are something unique in the industry. Now, most of you may be familiar with the granularity and deeper security. Like granularity is something often people struggle to understand. So I usually show a picture. If you have, say, two SQS queues, you can tune or optimize those two queues differently. Those two queues may sit as part of a microservice or maybe part of two different microservices. The same is the case with every single service like Lambda or DynamoDB table, S3 bucket. We can tune each one individually as we need. So that's a great strength. Now, two important points here. One is the iterative development. Now, this is true with serverless in the sense that when we work with serverless, we don't kind of procure services in advance. For example, it's so common if you're familiar with the containerization. So you say that, okay, we need, these many instances of this type, etc., etc. And we say that, okay, we go into this contract, long-term saving, etc., etc. We don't say that, hey, AWS, give me 100 S3 buckets. I need 20 queues or, 200 DynamoDB tables. No, we just consume as we need. So this is like from a kind of procurement, we are moving towards a progressive provisioning approach with serverless development. We just, consume what we need for the next iteration. Now, engineering diversity is like, when you work with enterprise or serverless teams, we often don't see programmers. We see engineers who are capable of doing several things, including programming. So that's why I always insist that when we work in serverless, when we are part of a serverless engineering team, the engineer's responsibility is beyond being just a programmer. They must understand security, how to secure things, what is the least privilege principle, and they need to understand SQL, NoSQL, and they need to understand how the queuing mechanism works and all sorts of things. So that's why this, the serverless brings that sort of diversity into a team, which is actually, in my opinion, is a great thing, because that then takes them closer to being architects. So that's the important thing. Now, the most important aspect of understanding serverless is this one. So this is where small to big organizations get it wrong. And then they make a big noise about serverless and technology and whatnot. For example, suitability. Okay. There are situations where serverless is not suitable. Identify them and then use the app technology accordingly. Cost. AWS publishes the cost computation for all their services. So if you don't compute the cost or estimate the cost for the certain services, and then if you blame technology, it's our fault. Okay. Similarly, the quota. We say that it's endlessly scaling, but there are certain limits. There are certain limits, API quotas or service quotas, so on and so forth. So these things are, essential to understand before we accept serverless into a team or an organization. Similarly, control. I mean, there are certain things you don't need to get to do, like, connecting to a server and doing a patching and things, because those things taken care. So all these aspects, it must be understood in order to become, successful with serverless adoption. Now, serverless is more than just a technology. I know we are kind of moved away from this thinking now that is considering serverless as a function as a service. And also it's not just frameworks. It's not just an architectural diagram of things like that, because serverless is an ecosystem. What do I mean by this? You might be thinking, oh, Sheen, not again. We don't need another definition for serverless. Oh, by the way, if you ever wondered the different definitions of serverless, there is a recording of Jeremy Daly's talk from 2019 Serverless Days Milan. It's on YouTube. Watch. I was there when Jeremy was listing definition after definition after definition of serverless. And I was due to give a talk on that afternoon. I also had my own definition of serverless. You know what? I edited the slide, and then I said, today, serverless became definitionless, because I was so kind of, overwhelmed by all the different definitions. Anyway, so it's not a definition here. Now, if you're someone familiar with biology, you know the sort of the geography of the ecosystem knowledge concept. So in an ecosystem, you have several things, plants, animals, living, non-living organisms, etc., etc. So here is a simple kind of mashed up diagram of a seashore ecosystem, maybe. So you see that sort of birds and fish, plants, stones, pebbles, sand, etc., etc. So in a way, we can enhance our understanding of serverless or the serverless mind in this way. The reason is, if you take serverless, so we have the cloud platform as the foundation. So that's the foundation where all the serverless managed services are built on. So then we have all the characteristics and capabilities that we saw, along with the managed services like the Lambda functions or SQS or SNS, even Bridge, all sorts of all the managed services. Now, they alone don't make any sense because they require the tools and ways to knit them together or connect them together so that infrastructure as code and the observability aspects of things. And who is doing all this? It's us, builders, right? Engineers. And who we are building for. We don't just simply, you know, get up one day and build services. We are working for stakeholders. So all these and more will become part of the serverless ecosystem. So we need to have the broader mindset of seeing the whole thing as, as an ecosystem of so many different things coming together to build value for the business. So that's a way I kind of recommend people to see the serverless development mindset, because as you know, serverless application development is basically bringing the different managed services and orchestrating them with events or other mechanisms, and kind of wiring them together with infrastructure as code. So this is important to clear the mind that it's not just one thing, it's a bunch of things that are all part of the ecosystem. And then
Quick question for you, if that's okay.
yeah.
I believe you're sharing the potentially the wrong screen, because if you're switching through slides, all we see is the intro slide still, or the PowerPoint image. So we don't actually see you flipping through the slides. So you may be just sharing the wrong screen.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No. I should have caught this earlier.
Oh, okay, no worries. I will go back and start again. Um right, okay. Are you seeing this slide deck?
Yeah. So if you slide it, we see it. So yeah, but it was still stuck on so now I see you changing the slides. Previously, it was still just stuck on the intro slide.
Okay. So I'm now sharing. Do you see my picture?
I see your picture and the book.
And the book. Okay.
So that's slide 2, I believe.
Yeah. Is the book up now?
Yep, the book is up right now, Phil.
And the QR code?
The QR code is still there.
Okay. Okay. Now, has it changed to the universe picture?
No. For what it's worth, I mean, we've all been enjoying the great storytelling. So, like, this is working without the slides too. I just figured if the slideshow doesn't work, then we can always just, just have you talk. And the storytelling is great without it too.
So that's probably going to spoil everyone's experience. Okay, let's try again.
Sure.
In a different way. What do you see now?
I see the universe is expanding.
Okay, right. So what I will do is I will. Do you see the Earth climate
Yep,
changing now?
it's changing. Yep, yep. That's
Okay.
perfect.
So what I will do is rather than the clicker based show, I will just go through each slide.
Yep, that's perfect.
So I may lose the progressive uh,
Okay.
content, but that's okay. It's
Yeah,
nothing.
and people are enjoying it. You're getting great comments. So I would just keep going from where you were, and yeah.
Okay, now I'll just quickly go through. I mean, it won't take too long. So, okay, a nice experience. So rewind. Okay, reset your mindset. So as I was saying, it's expanding. This is basically I was trying to, kind of come up with the change terminology, just kind of prepping you to understand the importance of change. So as I was saying, because we demand so many things, we need everything closer to us, ear, eyes and hands and etc. So that's why the continuous evolution of technology and the innovation. So this is the book I was referring to, Dave Anderson's great book on the flywheel effect. So, and as I touched on, the serverless is for you if you acknowledge, and accept change. And so this is what I was, saying, comically saying that, the mainframes where people made money because the sort of the evolution then moved on to virtual machines and cloud, and how we got to serverless. So this is a quick evolution of, the how things moved on from back in those mainframe days onto modern serverless, and beyond. The term appeared in 2012, and we have so many serverless services from AWS and other cloud providers. And the quote from Jeff, when I asked, okay, Jeff, what's next for next after serverless? He said, no, Sheen, we haven't, dealt completely with serverless. We are just starting with serverless. And the three important aspects I mentioned about serverless, the characteristics most of you are familiar with, the benefits where I stressed on the the iterative development and the engineering diversity in teams. So those are the sort of the important aspects to keep in mind when we think of serverless. And the considerations where I mentioned about, the understanding the service limits or the quota, and the control, how much can we kind of, control the services we operate, and the cost and the suitability, two important aspects when it comes to serverless adoption and evaluation. In the chapter, in the book, Chapter 2 is all about evaluating your enterprise for serverless adoption, where we talk about, you know, here, here are use cases. Some use cases may suit serverless, some use cases may not. Some use cases you may change and then re-architect to suit. So there's all the sort of, understanding. And the ecosystem analogy I mentioned is like, the geographical ecosystem where many things kind of come together or live together. So this is the picture I was referring to as kind of a mashed up picture of a seashore ecosystem. The reason why is because in a serverless, if you think of serverless, the entirety of serverless, we have cloud services, we have managed services, we have the unique characteristics of serverless, and then we have tools and technologies like infrastructure as code or observability. And all these things happen because we need to bring those things together, and we don't bring things together just for the sake of it, because we work for organizations, we work for stakeholders, so everyone becomes part of the sort of the ecosystem. So this is kind of my representation of serverless ecosystem. It's basically, I mean, those who those who've been working on serverless know all these most of things. But people who are new, they shouldn't just think that our serverless is just a function or this or that. So that's why I always bring this to new engineers adopting serverless, to bring that, broaden the mindset so that they can learn and make
make
less
less
mistakes.
mistakes.
And
And
now, serverless is for you if you architect well. Now, this is like a broad topic. When it comes to architecture, it's a big topic. So, for example, there are differences between what we call building architecture and software architecture. So here is Taj Mahal. It's one of the the most popular iconic buildings in the world. The thing is, once it's built, we don't expect it to change. Even if we try to change, you won't be allowed to change. For example, we can't simply make a connecting bridge between two pillars, or we can't make an extension to the dome, for example. Whereas when it comes to software architecture, we should be able to do all those things because of all these abilities that are expected from the application we built: scalability, extendability, sustainability, and all sorts of things. Now, these things bring a different dimension to the applications we built. Now, there are kind of experts on social media. They say that 99.9% of the organization only need a single server on a table. They don't need cloud, they don't need anything else. But thing is, those experts don't live in the engine room firefighting when your website goes down. So that's exactly the reason why we build redundancy, to make sure the high availability. When you think of redundancy, obviously, already kind of redundant setup. So that's the reason why we need all this. It's so easy for people out there to preach all these things, but understanding this and taking care of complexities is what we should be doing. So modern systems are complex. We say this, we hear this all the time. What is not complicated? It's been complexity has been there for ages, not just modern software. Maybe the modern engineers are pampered with everything kind of easy life, so we think that everything is complicated. Take, for example, our body. It's probably the most complicated thing in the whole universe, right? Are we not managing? We are. There are certain things hidden. They function perfectly. There are certain things visible. They also function perfectly. If you think of our body, say, for example, we say a hand, right? And it's already made of different parts in a way of different microservices, if you want to think that way. We are already event driven. Brain needs to send the signals to raise my hand or do something, right? So we are capable of managing complexity because we are so used to mourning things, so we can't stop it. Now, when it thinks of complexity, the two ways I think. There are certain technologies that are complex by nature. I don't want to name anything. Probably you can relate something starts with K and probably ends with an S. Now, enterprises are building applications using that. That's fine. That's their requirement. They may hire, army of consultants, spend a lot of money for the sake of agnosticity or lock-in, etc., etc. That's okay. But what we do, that's the concerning thing as we adopt serverless, is we build complexity sometimes with the simple technologies. So that's what brings us to this sort of situations. Tangled architecture with serverless. With no care in the world, we just start, connecting service one after another with no structure. This is exactly the reason why we need proper architecture thinking and the understanding when we build serverless applications. Now, often people think that, everyone is talking about serverless first, serverless first. I just started to think, is that mindset to blame why some of us get into the serverless complexities? Maybe, maybe not, because we know that serverless is not a silver bullet. It's not a problem solver for everything. But the important thing to understand is serverless first does not mean serverless must. then what is serverless first? I know Dave Anderson touched on in his book as well. Serverless first for me is the thinking or the thought process to consider serverless as the technology choice for the application or the feature to be developed, but doesn't mean that that is the must one. So we evaluate its best fit, fitness for this particular use case, and then see what can we do with serverless or with other technologies. So that's the way of thinking, the serverless first mindset. Now, I often talk about these first principles of serverless adoption. First principles is nothing related to serverless. It's just a common thing. So basically, first principle thinking is the thought process of breaking things down into the fundamental, elements or the primitives. And when we get to that level, it will help us innovate the solutions, to build. And in that case, in that situation, serverless is just a technology enabler. That's how we should see the adoption of serverless and the so-called the serverless first, idea. Now, what are some of the first principles that you can think of? So, for example, domain-driven design, domain first. Before you start serverless, you think in terms of splitting and organizing your organization into different domains, and then the team first comes in. APIs, microservices, event-driven, then bring serverless in. You may be thinking that, oh, security first or DevOps first, test first. Yes, fine. Bring them in as and when and where they fit those. So that thinking, should be there when we work with serverless. There are three different pattern elements I often bring: organizational patterns, team pattern, and the design or implementation pattern. So we have three wonderful ways, and many other ways of kind of looking into it. So domain-driven design and team topologies. I was at a conference on this Tuesday, Fast Flow conference in London. The entire conference is based on team topology. So there have been wonderful stories shared by different people on how they structure their teams. So, and then microservices and many other kind of, patterns that are, familiar to many of us. So if you are unfamiliar with the domain-driven design, here's a brief thing. It's not going to cover everything. So it's basically identifying the domains of the organization. Sometimes an organization can be just one domain, like insurance or e-commerce. Sometimes could be multiple domains. And then we break it down into subdomains, or subdomain in the sense that divisions within the organization. So where we identify certain departments, so the way you can relate that, or certain core aspects, core functionalities, what we call core domains and things like that. When we get to this level, it becomes easier to identify the boundaries of certain things within these sort of subdomains. So for example, a customer boundary or representation of a customer in, I don't know, insurance quotation domain could be different from insurance claims. So the details could differ. So the bounded context is basically a boundary where a model becomes valid. So that's why I was saying, like, the customer representation, one boundary could be different. But the boundaries are important because when we have boundaries, we can assign team ownerships. We can assign teams. This is where the team topologies comes in with the stream aligned, and if there is a team or a product, if you consider, say, cloud platform as a product in your organization, so that's part of the platform team. Or there could be teams that become enablers for other teams, enabling teams. And most of the feature teams, you can say stream aligned teams, because they have a focus to deliver something, mostly developing services and things. Now, when we have this sort of ownership, this is kind of coming to the autonomous teams kind of territory, then it becomes easier to think developing applications, microservices, because those services now have a boundary and each service has its own boundary. So it becomes easier to kind of bring in serverless into this now That means you won't be building tangled architecture. Your services will be kind of small, simple, single purpose with clear boundaries, communication, contracts, etc. So that's kind of the way to think when it comes to architecture. So this is, an important quote in this book is like hardest problem for us is problem decomposition. Problem decomposition could be, could differ where based on the context. For example, for an organization, breaking down the organization could be the hardest thing. For a junior engineer or a student, I don't know, working out how to implement a sorting algorithm or a queuing mechanism could be a problem. But how we break it down into different pieces, that's the art of software engineering. So once we have architected, now if we want serverless to be yours, you need to think in terms of sustainability. Now, sustainability is like a term, a couple of years ago, maybe chaos engineering was a thing. It comes and goes. Everyone talks about sustainability for a while, and then no one talks about sustainability. So sustainability is basically, in general, it's basically a sustainable, kind of developing things, for the future, or taking care of things for the future. That's the whole idea of the green energy, low carbon, etc. Because we want our Earth to be kind of, sustainable for the long future. So sustaining is basically a generic term that means you kind of keep something going with a little bit of nourishment and things so that it kind of exists and evolves for a long time. We can think serverless development in a way, in a similar way. So I often pitch these three different things. So that's why I call this sustainability triangle. On one side we have products, sustainable products that live longer. We can sustain them. And then we use processes, sustainable processes, to develop these products. And we operate them sustainably in the cloud. So all these three elements come together. The reason why cloud is so kind of, on the hot spotlight for sustainability is because if you think of cloud, there are three basic things: compute, storage, network. And if you need to do anything in any of these things, if you want to spin the disk or send some packets of data to the other side, it needs energy. So that's why the energy consumption is so huge with the cloud operation. So hence, it's so important. Now, if you think of sustainable product, this is how I differentiate. In the past, with the typical waterfall model, we used to this maintaining a product. So requirements comes along. Requirements, we get the requirements, and then we get into analysis, design, all the way to release, and then the product used to get pushed to a maintenance mode, because that's more of a end of life. It's an unglamorous maintenance team that will take care of bug fixes and patching and things like that. But nowadays, with the modern technology and approach, we iterate. We come up with an idea, we do the design, architecture, etc. Then we build and we push to cloud, we operate, and then we immediately take the next iteration. So that means we are sustaining. This is why we get into this sort of, multiple deployments a day or a week and etc. Because we are constantly progressing the development. So that's why I usually put the another MVP. Like MVP, we all know that it's a minimum viable product. So that's where we start. But with this iteration and progression, our goal is to make it a most valuable product. That's another MVP. So that is a way of thinking how we can, evolve a product. So when we think of, a sustainable product, so three main characteristics in my view. One, it should be modular, and then extendable and observable. Now, the first two, modularity and extendability, they kind of go together, because if it's modular, you know that, okay, you can extend. So you apply the different sort of patterns I talked about, the architectural patterns like event-driven and asynchronous, etc. Observability is also important because if we don't know what's happening in a service or in a bunch of microservices, we are sitting in the dark. There's no way we will be able to extend or do anything. So this is important because in this fast-paced iterative development, we need to observe something. If something broke, we need to fix and deploy and go forward. So that's why it's so important. They all kind of go together. Now, recently there's been so much noise about serverless. Is serverless hard? Event-driven architecture is hard. Serverless is hard, so on and so forth. As I mentioned, we've been through complex systems in the past, and why we are moaning about serverless, so difficult, etc. It's because of certain reasons that we don't often kind of follow. We don't understand its ecosystem, like I mentioned. We start with the wrong mindset. That is, we think it's too easy. Everyone kind of, gives that way, the opinion that, serverless, a couple of functions here and there, you're done. That's sort of the mindset we start with. Then we don't kind of promote engineers to understand more than the programming aspect. So, as I say, making engineers as architects, like I explained early on. That's important. So because that's important in a team developing serverless applications. And then the progression and the perfection, that one I talked about. We always look for perfection because in this fast-paced development, the perfection it comes as part of the iteration. We are improving as we iterate. We don't sit and look for the perfect moment to come up with something, or we don't like spend months perfecting our guardrails and principles before we kind of do something. We kind of improve as we go along, and then we corrupt the boundaries. So as I mentioned earlier on, when you have autonomous teams, they own autonomous teams own their the boundary. And what happens if you then have another team working or contributing here? Then you lose control. Who is doing what? I know from my experience in the past, there was a situation where a team I was part of, for some reason, there was another team was also asked to contribute to this sort of this serverless ecosystem. And 1 month, I noticed the cloud bill raised, $1,000 high. I had no idea. I was like, oh, what's going on here? Then I noticed there are a couple of, heavily used step functions, deployed to the service. And they were getting invoked, a few times every second. And they just finished within a few seconds or less than a minute. I was like, oh, who put these step functions, the standard step function? They should have been express state machines, but we didn't know because of the corrupt boundaries. So you will get into complications if you don't kind of honor the clean boundaries between teams. Now, these are all the reasons. It can be many other reasons why it can, serverless can be hard. Now, finally, serverless is for you if you believe in it. Now, the analogy I often use is like this one, roller coaster. Okay, I can't see you, but I usually ask people to raise their hands. And if you're one of the people who enjoy roller coaster rides, I'm sure you're the ones who once seated or stood up, depending on the ride, put all the the straps or the belts and things. These are the guardrails and principles, for example. And you will enjoy the ride because you're going to put your hands up and scream and shout and smile and etc. Those are the ones who enjoy the ride because they believe or they trust the roller coaster to do its work. If you sit there and hold your race so hard and try to kind of work against it, it's not going to work. You won't enjoy it at all. So that is the experience that you have to have when it comes to serverless adoption. You have to have your guardrails and principles and all sorts of the patterns and things that I mentioned. Then let the serverless technology do the magic. Let the cloud provider do it for you. So that is the belief that you need to have. So I'm going to close with the 4 different organizations who believe in serverless. The first one is PostNL. PostNL is the National Postal Service of Netherlands, and as you can see, the volume of the parcels and letters they handle. So they started the adoption back in 2018, and they've been kind of going successfully. And you must be familiar with our friend Luke, who is the principal engineer there, and according to him, he points to change. That's the only way modern organizations can equip to react change, to become, in the business and lead the business tomorrow. There is a case study in the book. It's 15 pages, and it talks about what made them to adopt serverless and how they went on and what lessons they learned and all sorts of things in there. So the next one is Taco Bell. It's completely different, business domain, as you can see. They have all over the world, presence all over the world. They moved to serverless a lot. They moved to serverless, around the same time. And for their observation, like 90% reduction in cost, I know there is a different big number. I can't remember the millions of lines of code they removed as they moved from the old legacy Java system to writing serverless functions. This again use case detailed in the book, and two great guys. Robbie, I think you must be familiar with Robbie. I think who was here earlier this year or last year, and an amazing character. And Vadim, for them, it just go serverless. Why not take some sort of board decision and within your guardrails and principles. So like, for example, some of their advice, like the good enough mindset, avoiding the big bang release, like similar to what I was saying, like the progression or the iteration, and embracing the simplicity. Don't make things complicated, keep things simple as possible. And so the next one is our own Momentum, and sort of a niche organization or a company you can think of, but they believe in serverless. They provide serverless cache as a service, so they keep on adding more and more features and capabilities to what they offer. They believe in serverless, and it's a bit awkward. Now I'm going to praise about Kawaja here. Now Kawaja, as most of you must be now familiar, is an amazing character. I mean, you go to him with any of the problems, that smile, he will just solve all your, issues in 1 second. So that's sort of the character. And this, the community where we are today, I'm talking here, the Believe in Serverless community. And according to Kawaja, it's about building the community and celebrating the readiness of the technology to, take it to the enterprise world. And it's there. It's there for everyone to take. And the final one is kind of a service provider. Anstack is based in India, Bangalore, and they were the pioneers who organized the Serverless Days event a couple of weeks ago. So they help customers to benefit from serverless adoption. So they kind of help customers to migrate and work with them and then hand over things to them. So for them, serverless adoption is basically adding more value for customers. So a couple of serverless heroes, like humble and down to earth people, and that's the way they see the benefit of serverless. So to close, serverless is for you if you just understand, or if you know all these things, like accept the change, because no matter what we do, it's changing all the time. We can say that, I don't want to move. I'm happy with where I am with my app server or whatever that we've been kind of stacked up for the last 20-30 years. But things are moving. Your competitors are way ahead. We know so many stories from the industry. Like, for example, when I was working with a couple of companies, early 2000, like the original Hewlett Packard and then Oracle, I used to be proud that I was part of, one of the top 5 software companies in the world. What happened? After a few years, the entire thing changed. Now Amazon's and Netflix and Facebook and Apple and all sorts of companies, they are in the leaderboard. So this is what happens if you kind of, stay idle and if you don't, progress. So the ecosystem is changing all the time. Understanding the capabilities and also the limits is necessary. And architecting well, it's so crucial. And I leave you with a final quote that if we consider yesterday as a legacy, then I think we must utilize our today or the current time to identify, assess, and work with the technologies of tomorrow. In that sense, the whole serverless technology ecosystem, along with all the other cloud services, is going to be the game changers of tomorrow for foreseeable future. So serverless is of course for everyone. Thank you so much, and also apologize for the the technical glitch earlier.
Sheen, thank you so much. This was a great talk. I started this in your intro saying how you're all about promoting other influencers and other members of the community, and you did not disappoint by calling out folks like Vadim, Robbie, Luke, Jivan, Prashant, and so forth. Like it's really incredible that with all this wisdom, you're also promoting the philosophies and the individuals that are behind this. The technical glitches were fine. I think everybody, Danielle, Alan, Mohammed, Hassan, everybody said that they just enjoyed the storytelling, and then it was nice to see the pictures afterwards as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Talking about community, you mentioned Rob, right? There is an echo. So we meet usually at reInvent. We talk nonstop. And Robbie already messaged me, Sheen, are you going to be at reInvent? So what happens is we meet and Robbie will keep on talking. So I kind of quietly observe all his stories. So now that the book is out, I'm keen for his next phase of conversation. So I may kind of gather everything and, write in different books. Such an amazing character, Robbie. Yeah.
So does that mean you will be at reInvent this year?
Yes, planning to be, yes.
Awesome. So I encourage everybody to find some time with Sheen. Sheen is currently in a transition period where he's just left Lego, and he's doing incredible things for the community in the meantime, and also looking for ways to make a more profound impact on the technical world. I know I'm going to find time with him and encourage everybody else to do the same. Thank you again for being here, Sheen, and thank you all the audience for tuning in. Join our Discord, our LinkedIn, our Twitter, and follow the YouTube channels for more content like this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.